There's my sweet boy. You ready to do some fun art? Something really easy? You're gonna stay right there and just keep a watch while we do some art. Okay, so I decided that since I did this in acrylic for my members only on Patreon. I have it upside down. We did this in Patreon for my members only. We did a live stream tutorial. So I thought that we would translate this into some watercolor today. So I'm gonna try it in watercolor. We'll see how it goes. And this is for everybody because I know more people in my Patreon are more interested in watercolor than they are in acrylic. So of course I'm gonna do something similar to this with watercolor today. That's gonna be our Monday video. All right, the first thing I am gonna do is I'm gonna paint the whole back. Well, no, let me change that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch out where I want my roses to be. This is a 5x7 hot pressed piece of watercolor paper. It's 140 pound. And the reason I'm going to sketch out, and I'm just drawing circles. I'm just going to draw some easy, simple circles for my roses about where I want them to be because I'm going to paint the background first. Now I'm not going to make circles or any kind of pattern for my yellow flowers or for the leaves. The background is going to be blue, so those yellow flowers, it's not going to be a big deal if I have blue behind them, but I want my roses to be nice and pink and pure pink. I don't want the blue mixing in with them, so I want a guide as to where I am going to actually put my background. So now I'm gonna just mix up a little bit of this sort of, I don't know, it's a turquoise, cobalt turquoise. Just mix it up. And I want it fairly light, so I'm adding plenty of water. And then I'm just going to paint my background with it, avoiding those circles where I know that I'm going to place my roses. And I'm just going straight onto dry paper. You can wet it first if you want, it's up to you. I don't care if it is like an even wash. It's all right if it's a little bit gradated or has darker spots in it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just going to get that color in there. And I'm working fairly fast. And if you want a white border, just tape off your paper. I'm going right to the edges. I'm not getting too precious with this. This is an experiment. I highly encourage you all to experiment as much as possible. It's how you learn. It's how you grow as an artist. There. So I'm gonna let this dry now, and once it's dry we'll come back and start on the roses. So I have mixed up a nice deep sort of reddish pink rose color, and I just have that on my palette. So we're gonna do this like we've done this before. We've done roses. I think I'm gonna change brushes and use my pointed round silver black velvet. I'm gonna load up my brush, and then we're just gonna start in the middle. I want it a little bit darker, so let me get a little bit more of that concentrated with a little less water in it. And we're just going to start doing those little, I call them C strokes or commas, right in the middle. And then you want to sort of overlap them, leave a little bit of white showing through the paper. That gets it looking a little bit more realistic. And what I'm doing is I am just dipping my brush into water. I'm not cleaning it, I'm just dipping it into water as I go out toward the edges. That'll make the petals lighter as they go out from the center. And you can even overlap some of those petals onto the green, it's okay. All right, so we got our first rose shape. We are gonna do that for all three. We're just gonna start with sort of a spirally shape in the center, with our petals sort of overlapping each other, letting plenty of white show through. Just gives it some contrast. And I'm going to dip my brush, not washing it off, I'm just dipping it to get more water on the brush so that when the paint comes out it's much paler. And we are going to continue to do that on the other rows. So load up our brush. We're going to sort of start a little swirl in the center. And then we're going to pull those sort of C strokes. They're shaped like little C's or little arches, little rainbows, whatever you want to call them. Whatever makes you happy makes me happy. And we're just going to sort of overlap them. And as they go further out, we're going to add a little bit more water to our brush and pull those shapes out further and make them a lot larger, those strokes. And again, it's okay if it overlaps with some of that blue background. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more of the color in the center. Now we're going to let this dry. We're going to let this dry and we're going to work on it a little bit more. Alright, those roses are dry, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint in the yellow flowers. Now with these yellow flowers, I am going to go with a nice Naples because it's a little bit more opaque, and just a little bit of white gouache, which will also make it a little bit more opaque. And that is to try to help cover that blue-green background. So what I'm going to do is I am going to say that there is an imaginary circle right here that's going to be the center of my flower. Now if you want to, you can lightly pencil in a circle if you don't trust yourself. So I just penciled in a little bit of a circle there. I am going to come back and get some of this pale yellow, and we are just going to do some petal shapes that meet right in the center, right in the center of that circle that we have there. And leave the circle open. That's going to be our center, obviously. Then I'm going to come back and get some of this darker Naples yellow, and I'm just going to put that right around that center and let it just flow into the petals. You know, I think I might want that flower to be a little bit bigger, so I am going to come back and just make those petals a little bit fatter at the edges and a little bit longer. The flower looks a little lost, just a little bit lost. We'll even have it running off the paper, I don't care. There. Now I'm going to reapply some of this darker color just around the center. And then I'm going to pick up some of this, just a little bit here and there. There. Now we're going to do the same thing over here, and I will draw a little imaginary, I'll draw the circle, but normally I wouldn't draw the circle, I would just, you know, eyeball it. Eyeball the imaginary circle. So I'm mixing this with a little bit of white. Some people call it white watercolor. It's gouache. Just making it a little bit thicker so that the background doesn't shine through as easily. And we're just going to make sort of teardrop shapes for our petals. They're fat on one end and they come down to almost a point right at that circle. Can make these a little bit bigger, and you can make 4 or 5 petals, it's up to you. I think we're gonna stick with 4 there. I'm gonna come back with this Naples yellow again and just do the centers. Just do around that center some. Now while this one is still wet, but it has dried just a little bit, I am gonna take a little bit of yellow, sort of like a yellow ochreish color. And I'm gonna go right around that center with it. I mean, like very, very center. And it's still a little bit wet, so it is going to spread, which is what you want. You want it to spread. You want it to look like it has soft edges. I might need to wait for that one to dry just a little bit more because it is not spreading as well. So we'll just wait for that one to dry. In the meantime, we'll put one of these flowers sort of looking down from the side over here. So we're sort of looking at it from the side, and it's opened up away from us. It's not open straight toward us. And we can put some of that darker yellow right at the base, like so. Now we're going to let this dry, and we're going to work on some leaves next. All right, now that's dry, so I'm going to mix up a little bit of, I'm going to use some of this cobalt turquoise and a little bit of this white gouache, just to lighten that up just a tad, and then some green. Let's see, let's go with a little sap green. All right, it needs a little bit more blue, just a touch more of that turquoise blue. I'm gonna have to fill my paint up. It's almost a little bit more white. And just a teeny bit more green, just a teeny bit. There we go. That's the color I was looking for, sort of a minty green. And I'm just gonna do some leaf shapes. All I'm doing is a rounded, sort of like the same stroke that you use for the petal flowers, the rose petals. You just do a comma one way, then a comma the other way. You can add a little point to your leaf, and then just bring down a little stem. And we're just gonna put some of these different spots. It's up to you where you want to place them. I'm just sort of doing it by ear. I'll put some there, put some here. And when you're doing your sprigs, your twigs, the stems, just go on the very tippy toe of your brush. Just really light pressure to get those thin lines in there. Let's see, let's do one more just right here. Just kind of go behind that rose. Maybe put a little small leaf here. Now while they're still wet, you can come back in and add a little bit of a darker, like darker green to that, and just drop it in here and there, just to give it some interest, so that it's not all flat and just one tone, one value. You know, values, having contrasting values, that's what makes your paintings more interesting. All right, so we got those leaves. Now let's see, let's Let's do some darker green leaves. Let me come in here with some Pearline green, maybe some hunter's green, whatever dark green you have. And then I am going to mix some blue with it because I want it to still have that sort of blue cast, but just be darker. So I'm mixing some blue. You can even get a little bit of your white gouache if you want, and mix that in. And then I'm just going to do some leaves here and there, some darker leaves. Let's do one coming out here. Put some darker leaves here, maybe. Let's see, where else do we need a darker leaf? Maybe put one here. Put some here. Maybe a couple down here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go in with a lot more, a much darker like aqua green into that. And we're just going to touch it into some of these places. This one's drying pretty quick, so it's not blending as well, but it's okay. It's okay, it's okay. So in these darker leaves, they got a really nice dark contrast. Now I want to do some, we're gonna let this dry first. Let's let this dry. Okay, we've let that dry some. So I'm gonna come back and do some really deep red mixture. Just a nice dark red, and I'll probably mix, here, let's wash this off. Let me wash my white gouache off because I got a lot of dark color on it, so I'm just gonna wash that off real quick because I don't want that green to mix with my red. So let's wipe that off, dab it up so it doesn't cause us to have a gray color. So now I'm just gonna take just a little bit of this white, mix it in with the red to make it just a little bit more opaque. And then I'm gonna do some berries. And all I'm going to do is just do little circles, little ovals, little blobs. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is nature. Nature is beautiful just like it is. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can make some of them a little oblong. It's okay. So I'm going to just go around and do a few little berry shapes here and there. Okay, let's do some here. And don't worry, I'm going to come back in there and we are going to give them a little life with some white gouache. But for right now, we're just getting the base color in. Let's see, where else can we have some? Let's have some right here. So now we've got our berries in. We're gonna come back to the roses. I want to mix a little bit more of that sort of rosy color red. just going to add a little bit of darker sort of lines here and there, some shadows, and then you can sort of just take your wet brush and just sort of blend those out here and there. You can put more of that color right in the center, make it really dark if you want. Up to you. And we'll do the same thing on the other ones. Just do some darker reds here and there, just to add some contrast in the tonal value. And again, wherever you want to sort of blend that out, just take your brush with some clean water and just sort of go right next to that wet paint and let it sort of blend out so it's not so hard, such harsh edges. Gives a little more life to the roses. I'm just sort of taking some water and sort of smearing some of that around, just letting it blend around. This edge is a little bit hard. Just put a little bit more. All right, we'll leave that alone. Now we're going to come back to our white gouache, put a little yellow in it. And this we are going to add some lighter colors to our flowers, to our yellow flowers. And Dorian Gray, he is back there. He is just cheering us on. He is our hype man. Just adding some highlights, just messy. It doesn't have to be perfection. It can just be messy. And then if you want to just add a little bit more yellow in that white highlight here and there, just to brighten that up if you want to, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to get a little bit of white gouache, some clean white gouache, and put it on my palette. So I'm going to go do that and let this dry a little bit. I'll be right back. So I've got a little bit of gouache out on my palette. Get my brush cleaned off, and I am just going to pick up a little bit of this gouache, pretty thick, a creamy consistency. I'm just going to add some highlights to these berries to sort of wake them up. Some of these berries are a little bit wet, that's fine. Just going to wake them up with a little bit of highlight with this white gouache. There we go. Now some of these leaves are way darker than I intended, so the way I'm going to remedy that is I'm just going to wet part of that leaf. Then I'm just going to take a cotton swab and just sort of dab it up, lighten it up some. You can do the same thing with your brush and just dab it up, but I'm just using a cotton swab. And this is called lifting, and again you can do it with a clean damp brush as well. I'll show you. Alright, I'm rinsed my brush off, I'm getting the excess water off. I'm going to wet an area and just sort of pick up that excess pigment, that excess paint, and just wiping it on my kitchen roll or paper towel, whatever you want to call it. So you can do it as well with your brush. So that's two ways you can do lifting. And I think this one needs to be lifted just a little bit. I'm just going to do it with my brush since I've already got it started. So that gives a little more contrast. Alright, now I am going to work on the center of these flowers, and I am going to go with a nice dark, almost, well, it's not almost, it is a burnt sienna. I'll mix a little bit of that yellow in there. And I'm going to go right in the center. You know, I think that needs to even be darker. I might go with burnt umber. Let's go with the burnt umber. And let's just do a little bit of dots in the center. That's going to be the center stamen. You can bring it out into the petals if you want. And wherever you want it. Alright, so we're going to let that dry some. While that's drying, I am going to just do a little bit of line shading, or just a little bit of shading on the back of this flower using that same brown color. I'm also going to pick up some of that brown, then I'm going to get the excess water out by just touching it to my paper towel. That way I have more control over where the paint actually ends up, because I want some of this to be like petal, like lines that go into the petals from the center. So with the paint being a little more dry on my brush, by taking out that excess moisture, I can control the paint a little bit better in this wet area, because this is still damp. It hasn't dried completely. And I don't want my paint to spread all over. I want it to sort of keep the look, keep those little lines crisp without spreading. So that's one way you have a little bit more control of your paint. We're going to do the same thing on the other one. Just tap it off. And just do some little lines out into the petals. And I might do even darker lines right here. There. I'm going to take some of this white, this really white gouache. And I'm just going to highlight some parts of these petals. There. Now I am going to get my small brush. I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to get my small brush and do a few more details, and we're going to be done. Alright, so I've let this dry, and I am going to mix up a really dark color. I'm just using really dark colors. And I'm using my detail brush, and I'm just gonna put in the stems for my berries. And maybe a little stem poking out the other end. And you can also maybe put in some lines here and there if you want, just to give a little bit of veining. It's optional, and you don't have to do it everywhere. You can just do a little bit here and there. Alright, I think this is pretty much done. If let's see. Maybe I'll add a little bit of highlights to some of the leaves here and there. Just a touch here and there. You don't have to do a lot. But I am going to call this one finished. I think I am going to add a few more details though on my roses. I think I am going to go back in, just do a little bit more in just a few spots. Just like that. That looks a little better to me. Alright, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you give this a try. You see how simple it is. And if you want to do it without having to worry about the green or this background mixing in with your other colors, then paint the flowers first and then paint the background around them. I know everyone says you're supposed to paint the background first in watercolor. It's like a rule or something, but here we get to break our own rules. We get to make our own rules, so don't be scared to try that. Alright, thanks for watching, and thank you to all my patrons on Patreon for your support. It means the world to me. Alright, happy painting.